We're really happy that you're here, and without further ado, go ahead. I'm going to pass it over to our two speakers of the evening, Ashley Wood and Nicole Vance.
Hi. Well, let's jump right in. My name is Nicole Vance, and I and my colleague Ashley are both nurses in Sacramento, California, and chapter members of the Capital City Black Nurses Association, part of our ad hoc allyship committee. And there we are. So I'm both a nurse and educator at UC Davis Health. My fun fact is that I'm currently getting my master's right now, and this picture is from my first day of school, or my first day of 19th grade, as I called it. And though I'm making it, I'm surviving, and I've learned all kinds of new PowerPoint skills. Only one of the plants that you see on the porch behind me have actually survived my leadership journey.
And I'm Ashley Wood, and this is a picture of my family. I'm a mom of 3 boys, 8, 6, and 4. And the fun fact is they started their own YouTube channel recently, so you can only imagine what's on there and how fun that is.
So our objectives for today are to hopefully leave some of you just a little more empowered to evaluate systemic inequity and advocate for change in the sphere where you are. Each of us, we have community organizer, we have nursing, we have educators, we have people also from the community that aren't in healthcare. Each of us have our niche, each of us have our role, each of us have our place, and from that place also to understand the role of nurses as not just allies, but advocates within and outside of the hospital. And we would be remiss if we didn't tell everyone about the Capital City Black Nurses Association. This is the Sacramento chapter of the National Black Nurses Association, and our aim is to continue to support, retain, and recruit Black nurses. We have a scholarship that we've just opened up, so no requests to donate or participate in that scholarship will be turned away, but it's a really exciting organization to be a part of here in Sacramento. And I think some of you who were listening yesterday might have heard from Cherie Kreiner, who's the vice president of the CCBNA.
So a little disclaimer, we are white, shocker. And the reason why I want to talk about that is because regardless, we have done a lot of research and we have been allies for a long time, but this is coming through our lens as white women growing up in the United States. And the reason we need to discuss that is because we are allowed to opt out of the trauma. We have that privilege. We can close the book, we can turn off the news, and we can take a break, where as a Black community cannot do that. So it's just understanding the ally role in that aspect. Also, we're going to talk about not being perfect. Allyship is a very imperfect role that we have to figure out, and this presentation isn't going to be perfect, so we just want to set that up for that. So let go of the perfect, and as we move through our presentation.
So before we get started, I'd just like to set some norms. In structuring this talk and thinking about what we wanted to talk about, our aim is really to share a message, some education from a perspective of being white, but mostly for our white colleagues. And so I want to just set the norm that defensiveness and discomfort are not only okay, but they're expected. What we're talking about is something that, like Ashley said, we've had the privilege and the ability to ignore and to pretend isn't an issue because it hasn't impacted us directly. And as a result, there's a whole lot of cognitive dissonance and a whole lot of systems set up in our own brains to continue to perpetuate oftentimes what can just be continued denial and just a collective denial around it. And so in that, as reactiveness might be the norm, as reactiveness can come up in each of us. I want to encourage everyone to just be sweet to yourself, be sweet to other people around you, acknowledge that this is a human issue. And because also right now we're really in unprecedented times. You know, this isn't a talk that would be given virtually, but right now here we are. And for those of us, there may be that discomfort of digging in, even for the first time. For others, there's a lot of fatigue of watching these cycles play out, of someone getting murdered and then getting perpetuated and spread around. And then everyone gets really excited and talks about it for a few months, and then it dies out. And the same inequities and the same disparities and the same problems and the same racism continue again and again and again, and a copy and paste variations on the same theme. And some of us have the privilege of moving on from that news cycle. And so we're all a little raw right now for a lot of reasons. And so just be sweet to yourself. And also, anytime you're discussing race, this isn't sepsis. This isn't something that we've got ampicillin and, 5 days of every 8 hours is going to fix this. This is something that we're talking about that is old, that is systemic, that is ingrained, that is unconscious and conscious, and has impact beyond our own circle. And so there's not going to be a sense of closure. And there's most likely not going to be a sense of closure after today. There's not going to be a sense of closure after reading a certain book. But there's going to be a combination of steps that, when brought together, weave a thread of change in our lives and the lives of our community. So why nurses? I know we've all heard the stories or the polls that we're a trusted profession. Also that we're already advocates. I've coined the term in my career. I've been a nurse 16 years. And about 6 years ago, I work in pediatrics, and right now pediatric critical care. I coined the term NADvocating. It's something that we do a little more often in July. It's something that we do a little less in May because people have kind of figured things out. But we're advocates. And as that, being in that place, we're perfectly positioned. For me, even though I didn't grow up understanding or being on the receiving end of racial inequality, it wasn't until I saw the disparities with my own eyes with my patients that I began to realize this was something I needed to start learning about. And we'll talk more about it, but we're in a lot of ways at the eye of the storm. And so we can see things a little more differently, and we're trusted. And I think regardless of your political beliefs, we can all agree that to wait for legislation is to wait too long. And that it really is on us, on those of us in the community, to take up our own journey, to take up our own education and cause, and really start actually putting actionable steps towards change, beyond reading books, beyond reading articles, beyond making yet another lit review about systemic inequity in healthcare. And also, one thing I wanted to say, I didn't talk about it before, but it's something that's come up for me as well. And again, in even preparing for this talk, especially for my white colleagues, as you're looking into this subject and this issue, expect to feel disoriented. Expect your brain to throw confusion as a defense mechanism of, oh, I can't, this is just, I don't know, this is just too overwhelming, or this is too, expect that feeling of disorientation. Disorientation, confusion, discomfort, none of it means anything's gone wrong. It actually means you're getting a little bit closer to the truth of the matter. I'm gonna figure out this pointer before this talk is done. I'm just gonna promise y'all right now. So we're talking about racial bias, but really we're talking about racism and prejudice. And it's not one thing, but it's complex, it's nuanced. And it's really the result, especially what we're seeing play out right now in our country again and again and again. It's the result of making whiteness the norm. I love this quote, this description, whiteness as the invisible, omnipresent norm. And it's easy to disassociate and say, oh, well, I'm not a white supremacist. I'm not those people on the news, you know, with the Confederate flag. I got my family to take their Confederate flag down. It's a shared belief. It's a shared unconscious belief that whiteness is the norm. I can't speak for everyone else. I can only speak for my textbooks in nursing school. But when I look back and when I look at what I was given as far as cultural competency, it was woefully inadequate, and if anything, did more to perpetuate racist stereotypes than actually teach me how to be a better caregiver from a place of humility and openness. If anything, it was a chapter, maybe a box in a chapter. It was part of a lecture, part of a test. I remember taking a multiple quiz test about which type of cornstarch Mexican families believed would help a certain ailment. What the blip that had to do with anything, I don't know, but I know that we haven't improved that much in our ability to unpack and actually speak about cultural humility rather than give everyone like, hey, you know what, we taught you these 4 things that the editors of this journal or the editors of this book think sum up an entire culture of people as it pertains to their health. And we're going to give you 4 things, 3 questions. Okay, you've been signed off. Go forth and do no harm. It's just so silly. I mean, we wouldn't talk about almost anything like that. And yet nothing impacts the way we approach our health more than our culture, more than the way we move in the world, more than the way we move within our own families and community. And also with racism, with prejudice, something that has been powerful for me to realize, and I think for a lot of us, we're seeing all this research on neuroplasticity and everyone's so excited how we can rewire our brains. Our unconscious beliefs impact our behavior and our actions more than our conscious thoughts. So I may have a conscious thought that I'm a kind person and I'm a good nurse and I give all of my patients the benefit of the doubt, but there's just no way to grow up the way I grew up, in the world I grew up in, to not have unconscious beliefs. There's studies that have been done with children, and prejudice in children from 6 months to 3 years old can demonstrate prejudice, and not just prejudice towards different people, but identify whiteness as a superior quality and a safer quality. And that's not conscious, but it's in us. It's in us constantly. It's in us when we move from certain sides to the sidewalk to another because of whoever's coming down the street towards us. And being aware of that, bringing it to our conscious mind is how we unpack it, and then accepting responsibility for the impact of our actions that have come out of our conscious beliefs. A whole nother reason to expect disorientation. So back in 2002, the Institute of Medicine compiled a massive report about health disparities, looking at everything from pain management, maternal health, asthma, hypertension, diabetes, cancer, pediatrics, adult, home health, hospice, palliative, psychology, dermatology. How often do people get referred? Are they more likely to get referred to hospice if they're of this race or of this race? Are they more likely to get put on a controller with asthma if they're of this race or this race? And while the Institute of Medicine report did this in 2002, everyone has studied this for decades. And the results, it is one of the most scientifically reliable findings that there is health inequity based on race. And it's not always overt, but the manifestations, what is that phrase? You'll know the root when you see the fruit. We've got some stanky fruit in healthcare with how we're dealing with treating people equitably. Even in my own career, it's just a given that children of color, regardless of their neighborhood, are going to do worse with asthma exacerbations. And they're on a controller, and they've got great parents, and the amount of times I hear my colleagues, and I remember myself saying 10 years ago, oh, it's just compliance. It's just a compliance issue, when we know nothing about this family. We know nothing about their story. We know nothing about the barriers that are in their life. We know nothing about what has already been done to keep this child healthy, the amount of work in their family that it has taken to keep that child from being in the hospital. Now here they are, and how quickly, and I'm speaking for myself as well, we just slap that non-compliant label on. And just notice at the nurse's station, notice the next time you're at work, who do we call non-compliant? Who do we say isn't more likely? Which of our patients do we kind of, and so these disparities are one of the most reproducible facts in healthcare. And I actually, in preparing this talk, went back into so many lit reviews and so many meta-analyses because I wanted to give everyone the data. I wanted to basically just shove a bunch of data in everyone's face. And I couldn't decide, well, do I talk about maternal health? Do I talk about pain? Do I talk about asthma? Do I talk about hospice referrals? Do I talk about psychology? Do I talk about the fact that in 2020, we just now had someone come up with a way for dermatologists to identify different skin disorders on different skin pigmentation? Because what's in our textbook? It's white. It's white skin. And I'll be honest, I couldn't decide because there was just so much. So instead, I'm leaving everyone here and offering this Institute of Medicine report. And I think this quote that really beautifully sums up that to combat these disparities, it's on us. It's on us, whether we are white, whether we're a person of color, but especially, I would say, especially if we're white, and this is why we're here. This is why Ashley and I are the ones sharing this message and delivering this talk, is because it's on us. This is our problem. This is our issue. You know, disparities isn't a barrier for people of color. The racism that creates the barrier is. The racism that creates the systemic inequity is the barrier. And it doesn't matter if I woke up one day and decided to become a nurse, and when I decided to become a nurse, I didn't wake up and say, you know what I want to do? I want to go perpetuate a bunch of racist stereotypes, and I want to go contribute to health inequity, and I want to go give some of my patients more of a benefit of the doubt than others. And, you know, I'm going to be a little more likely to call security on someone that doesn't look like my family. I didn't do that, but that's still what happened. And that's still what's gonna happen until we start unpacking these things and we acknowledge that this is our issue. This is our problem. And it can be undone. We're seeing it. The needle's moving. It may be moving slower than we want, but it's still moving. And it's on us as nurses. So to combat these disparities, we have to explicitly acknowledge that race and racism factor into healthcare. Oh, but it's a social construct. Yeah, it is. But it's one we need to dismantle because it's killing people every day. I love this graphic, and I love this graphic because we talk a lot about equality and the difference between equality and equity. And equality is great because look, everyone's being treated equally. They've been given the same supports. Everyone has the same chance to get into the same college and get the same degree. And it doesn't account for maybe why those disparities still exist, because at least one person still can't see over that barrier. And equity in the second image, well, okay, we've changed the supports now. We've recognized there's a barrier. Let's elevate some and elevate others more than some. And now everyone can see the game. Okay, that's great. How about we just get rid of the barrier? How about we just remove the barrier? And then we don't have to spend so much time, you know, what we've done, I think, in healthcare for so much of it, we've been studying these boxes. And we've been obsessing over these boxes, and we've been looking at these boxes, and we've been shaking them, and we've been trying to make them perfect and pulling out our measuring tape and doing qualitative studies and quantitative studies on how to really perfect these boxes. Well, how about we just work on getting rid of the barrier that makes the boxes necessary? we have the hospital where I work at has a pain clinic. And the pain clinic also doubles as a cancer center. It's an infusion center. So let me rephrase. We have an infusion center that has now kind of started becoming more of a pain clinic. And there was an issue for a long time with patients who had sickle cell anemia coming in crisis, which we've all been told is a medical emergency. And these patients consistently, again and again and again and again, would get sent to the ER and then would have upwards of a 6-hour window before that first opioid was delivered, because they're dealing with the emergency room, they're dealing with admissions, they're dealing with a whole host of stuff. And then never mind, you have the whole extra layer of the fact that if you are Black, if you are a person of color, thanks to so many ingrained ideas about Black people in pain, you're less likely to be taken seriously and you're less likely to be offered a narcotic oftentimes. And so the nurses in the clinic were seeing this problem, and they decided to go back, look at all their policies and protocols, look at how we do things. What are we, how can we fix this? And when they went back, they looked and saw that because of the way the system was designed initially when the clinic was built, that patients with sickle cell anemia were second to last on the triage priority. Above first chemo, new chemo, chemo labs, so all the chemo patients were up here. And then the other element was, well, they're not going to get the care they need in the emergency room. And so rather than fight with the ER, rather than restructure everything, they changed a triage system. They designated a nurse navigator, and then found a way to just admit them straight to the clinic, get them started, get pain management going as soon as they got to the clinic. And they were able within weeks to reduce their time to first opioid administration from 6 hours to 50 minutes. And it was just a quick, like, hey, let's just look at how we're doing. So that's one area, but we all have our sphere. And these barriers aren't going to come down by sitting down waiting for people to vote them away, because that's just not going to happen. That's not how the world works. That's how a lot of things work. But there's just too many of us for that to be a quick fix. And so, I'll turn it over to Ashley.
So let's talk about allyship. So we're talking a lot about nurses becoming allies, and this word has been thrown around a lot lately. And I think it's actually becoming really heavy for a lot of people because there's all these definitions floating around. And for me, it's about serving others and taking yourself out of the equation. So what I mean by that is taking your ego out. If you enter in a movement and you're in it to make yourself feel better or make yourself look better, that's going to shine through, not your genuineness to actually want to be a part of the movement. And then let's talk about proximity. So this word is also being talked a lot about. So a lot of people are saying, well, I have a Black friend, I work with Black colleagues, I take care of Black patients, and I treat everyone with respect. So that makes me not racist. And that's not necessarily true. So proximity does not make you anti-racist. Real work, effort, education makes you anti-racist. And so the real work is educating yourself, diversifying your communities in your neighborhood or in your place of work, policy change, boots on the ground, protesting, speaking out. That's the real work. We can't, as allies, run to our Black colleagues, run to our Black friends and ask them, how do I do better? That is our role as an ally, is to do better ourselves. The information's out there, so it's up to us to just grab it. So activism has been talked about a lot too. So I kind of look at these two words as almost like an intertwined blanket. So activism is boots on the ground, you're in it, and allyship is, I look at it kind of a foundation, and then this activism branch comes off. But I do recognize this intertwine that they have. So I think back to nursing school, And there was a good group of us that when we learned how to insert an IV, we were sitting there going, okay, give me all the information. I need to read it all. I need to watch it a few times, and then I want to read it again, and then I'll try. And then there's a few of us that were like, hand me that needle. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to figure this out as I go. And that's kind of how I look at activism and allyship. So however you learn, whatever you're comfortable with, then do it that way. There's no, you have to be an ally before you're active. That doesn't matter. So we designed a toolkit. I want to just throw it out there that this is a starting point. This is a very foundational toolkit, and we divided it up into 3 different topics. So education, having conversations, and online etiquette. So the first one is education. So what I want to talk about first before we dive into education is there is an emotional component to this. And as you begin your journey, if you start today or if you've been on this journey for 60 years, it doesn't matter. It's an emotional journey. And I think the important thing about that is everyone starts at a different point. And it is a very personal journey. And we just need to respect that in ourselves, and we need to respect that in each other. And we're going to have a lot of feelings. A lot of people describe this like there's a pit in my stomach when I'm reading some of this or when I'm listening to certain podcasts. And that's okay. And I think it's great for nurses because we are great physical assessors. We find something small that's wrong, and because we know it can mean something huge at the end. So we're really in tune. And so being in tune to your body with that is perfect because you're able to stop, recognize that feeling, feel that emotion fully in private. So then when you encounter that outside in the world and you experience racism, prejudice firsthand, you can better respond because you have this extreme emotion privately. So you can be more quick-witted, I guess, in your response publicly. And lastly, giving yourself grace. So this to me is huge. We as allies, a lot of us sit there and go, how come I didn't know this before? I should have known this a long time ago. You should have known this a long time ago. And when we're speaking like that, that's shame speaking. And shame is the worst teacher in the world. We've all experienced this. How come you didn't know that? And we've all been on the receiving end of that, and it feels awful because it's shame. So if we set shame aside and not use that as an education tool, and we use grace and forgiveness and focus on moving forward rather than what we've lacked in the past, then that's what's going to help moving the needle forward. So with education, we are going to provide tons of resources on here, books, articles, Instagram accounts, anything, podcasts, because I love podcasts. So we'll have that all at the end so you can screenshot it. But with that, just some ideas with education. Finding a friend is huge. It needs to be a friend, though, that you trust implicitly, that you can be completely vulnerable with and share ideas, because like Nicole said, this is a really raw journey. So having a partner during it, that's mostly in a similar space, is a really great tool. Then there is no arriving. And some people have heard this, some people haven't. You can't read a certain amount of books and go, yep, I made it, I'm an ally, here I am. It doesn't work like that. This is a lifelong journey. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So keep that in mind. And if you need a break, it's that grace again. That's okay. Step aside, take a breather, knowing that you're going to step fully back into allyship, because allyship requires energy and it requires really good attitudes and just oomph, for lack of a better term. And so if you need to take a breather, take a breather. All right, so let's jump into this conversation thing. So this is typically where people are the most nervous. So in allies, I kind of have seen two roads with allies. One is that people are nervous to talk about things. And then this other road is, I found out this information, I want to make change, I'm a world changer, and everyone's got to hear it. So it's kind of this two-road thing. I think there's a balance. So for the people who want to come out just high energy, you need to know what I just read, that is fantastic. Keep that energy, but understand that the small conversations matter so much. You don't have to go run to the CNO of your hospital and talk about health and equity. Having the conversation with your colleagues on the unit and how you can do better, how we can do better, and having the conversation with your neighbors, your family, your friends, those really matter because those conversations change culture. We talk a lot about policy change, but policies can change, but it doesn't necessarily make culture change. When culture change, then the policies get changed that really influence culture for a long time. And that's what we're looking for, is staying power. So let's talk about the people who are nervous to have these conversations. That is okay. Nervousness means you care. So the power of imperfection. As nurses, we like to be perfect. It's in our DNA. We're here to serve people, and we want to do the best we can at all times, and that's fantastic, but we're humans. We're going to make mistakes. And with these talks, you're going to make mistakes, but having imperfect conversations is way better than staying silent. And I can personally relate to this. I cringe at some of the stuff I said years ago, yesterday. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just said that. But that's part of growth. Growth is not pretty. Growth is a little bit painful, but it just matters that you're growing. So that's okay. And also reading your audience. And the reason why I put this in is it's back to that journey. We're all starting at a different place. And so recognizing that in others. Someone once told me that planting seeds is what you want to do in hard conversations. It's not up to you how quickly that seed grows, but it's up to you to plant it. So if we just go around and drip on people and plant little seeds, that's a fantastic way to encourage growth and get people to just talk about stuff maybe they never would have. And so one thing about the conversation, you're fine, Nicole. Brene Brown is one of my idols, and she has a quote that says, "Stay awkward, brave, and kind." And I don't think there's a better quote with these conversations than, it's okay, you're gonna be awkward, but be brave and do it anyways, and always, always be kind. All right, so let's jump into online etiquette. So if you've been on any social media at all, you know it is on fire. So it's a little overwhelming. So how do you stand out from everything that's coming through? And honestly, being genuine and vulnerable is the best thing you can do. If you're starting your journey now, great. Be vulnerable and share that. Share the hard things that you've learned, share the great things that you've learned. If you've been doing this journey for 60 years, fantastic. Share your journey. What has been hard? What has been good? People who are friends with you on Facebook and Instagram are friends with you. They want to hear your voice because they love you, but they also want to hear your voice as a nurse, as a respected profession. And so when you share all these other quotes and things like that, that's fantastic because people have really great ideas, but don't just do that because people typically scroll past that and they just kind of become numb to it. They want to hear what you have to say. So really empower yourself and your voice. Also, I wanted to talk about sharing brutality videos. This has been a hot topic lately. So yes, if the murder of George Floyd was not videotaped and recorded, would the movement be as large as it is now? Maybe not. That video sparked outrage, and outrage came action and anger and change, which is fantastic. But we have to pause when sharing videos and ask yourself, am I doing more harm than good? And what I mean by that is just think of a couple of things. So one is vicarious PTSD. And I say that to a group of nurses. We can understand this probably better than most other professions. When we are watching someone suffering horrifically, and we can sit there and go, that could be me, that could be my child, that could be my dad, that could be my mom. It messes with your psyche. So that's what can happen in these videos too. So just reminding yourself that that can happen. So you want to be really cognizant before sharing. So just put that in the back of your mind of, am I going to cause more harm than good by doing that? So we've talked a lot about allyship and activism. So let's talk a little bit about saviorism. So sometimes this allyship and saviorism is this kind of very thin line that you can cross. It's a balancing act. So a lot of people who want to be allies and are excited about allyship put on their cape and they're like, let's go, I'm going to change the world and it's going to happen, which is a great attitude. I love that energy. But let's take this for example. So as nurses, a code is happening next to you for 45 minutes. And you go over there and you're like, you should start compressions. You need to push epi. That rhythm is shockable. Shock that rhythm. You would never walk into a code like that. It's been going on for 45 minutes. You would walk in and say, hey, can I bring you guys anything? Do you need more supplies? Do you need me to switch out compressions? I could do compressions for the next 2 minutes. And you ask, how can I be of service? And that's exactly allyship. That's the difference between allyship and saviorism, is how can you be of service to the movement? All right. I wanted to close out with a little empowerment. So we've talked a lot about nurses being the most trusted profession in the world, and we have been for decades. And with that honor comes a lot of responsibility. I don't want that responsibility to weigh heavy on us. I want that responsibility to feel really empowering, because we have these initials behind our names: RN, BSN, CCRN, NP, DMP. We have all these things, but they mean so much. And they mean so much not just in professional environments. They mean a lot in the community. So we kind of have our feet in two different places, and that is amazing. And that's the perfect position for us to really impact our country, our world, and the healthcare system to really provide equal, great care for everybody. And our voices matter. So I want to encourage you to really use your voice and really use your passion and help spark change in the healthcare system.
So we've actually found ourselves in a place we did not think we would be, which is slightly ahead of time. So this is a miracle and a blessing. What we have the option of doing, we do have some of I may just skip to the our resource section real quick if people want to take some screenshots of the slides while we have them up. Or what do you guys think, Casey and Nicole?
We will also share the images of all the slides after the fact as well. So if you want those resources, they'll be in image form, so you can't click directly through just our format, but it's really up to you all. If you want to do questions, we could certainly save some time for that. If there's a discussion question, we're up for that too.
Yep. Yeah. Let's do questions.
Thoughts? Casey, anything in the chats?
We don't have anything in the chat yet, but guys, feel free to put your questions in the chat and I can read them out loud for everyone to hear and we can kind of discuss them from there.
And I will say, I did see the question in the chat about the dermatology quote. Full disclosure, I was up in my feelings on that one. That's not in our reference list, so I'm happy to go back and provide the resource for that.
I think I found it. I think
person who said that. Okay, great.
Well, I shared it with Mike. If anyone else wants it, I'll pop it in the chat.
Okay.
What you were referencing, because it was from this year. But I thought this would be interesting to share too. Liz had a really interesting and good point. She remarked, I think the difference between allyship and saviorism is whether the focus is on the self or on others. I think that's
yes. So saviorism is very self-serving, is very, very self-serving. And that's a huge difference. And especially like with the code example, you're running in to be the hero. And that's not what's needed. What's needed is just help, is input and more feet and more hands, basically, and that's what it's about.
Well, and I think we've heard so much right now with the conversations that are happening a little more than usual, intent versus impact. Mm-hmm. And intent is so soothing. It's so comforting. But really, if we want to actually make an impact, then we have to look at our impact. Yeah. And we have to be able to accept feedback on our impact and see if we're hitting the mark or not.
Exactly right.
Does anyone have any questions for our lovely host?
Thoughts?
Or just thoughts?
Yeah, we love thoughts, guys.
Yeah, thoughts are great too. We actually have a question. It was sent to me privately. So, how do you keep emotions in check when talking about racism? I've had coworkers say inappropriate things to me, I think because I'm white, but they are comments that are so inappropriate. At times like that, I have a hard time keeping my emotions and rage intact, and I tend to shut down. Should I practice conversations with my best friend?
Ooh. Ooh.
Yes, I think it's a great idea, is to practice the conversations with someone that you can trust and truly, truly trust and practice. And I also, it's hard not to be emotional in this time. So giving yourself grace that it's okay that you need to walk away because you're so angry, that's okay. And one thing I've done at home is when I'm reading this information, I feel full in my anger. I feel full, I cry, I hit a pillow, and so I can fully express that anger, and I journal like crazy. So that way, when I encounter those conversations, I play it in my head of how it's gonna go, and I practice them in my head, and then that I'm better to respond in public because I'm less emotional about it and I'm more controlled, if that helps.
And there's nothing wrong in those heated moments to say, I am very uncomfortable right now. Mm-hmm. And if it's not something that you have the bandwidth to maybe go into a deep discussion, like, I'm really at that, what you just said makes me uncomfortable. And identify, I'm reading a book right now on nonviolent communication and owning your emotional response. But I've found the more that I'm present with my own emotions, it's okay. Like, of course we have emotions about this.
One thing that some people have tried during these conversations is saying, I don't get it. Why do you think that? And just play this like,
Could you tell me more about that?
Yeah, tell me more, because I don't really get it. And having people explain it like that, and they, as they're explaining it, they're processing like, oh, this is really racist. This is actually awful as I'm saying it, and it's making them realize what they're saying and breaking it down. So that's another option if that's a comfort level option too.
That's a great point for even off-color jokes.
Yeah.
Something like, I don't understand. Explain.
Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, I built a career on being a people pleaser and being the person that did everything so that everyone would be happy. That is probably 90% of the discomfort in this journey for me, is recognizing that people are just going to disagree. Mm-hmm. And that's how it is. Really good question.
All right. We actually have another one. And that was perfect timing that Jen shared that. So that was wonderful. How do you strike a balance of being well-informed, a good ally, and maintaining some sort of distance for your own mental health? I know being able to have distance is a privilege, but sometimes I feel like it's overwhelming.
Listen to your body. I think what Ashley said, like listen to your body. One of the reasons we led with this will be imperfect is because part of the side effect of not normalizing talking about race and talking about the impact of racism, one of the side effects of the silence is, well, if I'm gonna speak up, if I'm gonna do stuff, I have to do it perfectly. And let me tell you, the amount of drafts, Ashley can tell you, I tried to perfectionist my way through this when really what's needed is your authentic self. So you don't have to read all the books if you don't want to, find the facts, find the thread. If you keep your journey to the things that are speaking to you the most and the things that you're most passionate about, then it won't drain you because you're going to be in integrity with yourself and your insides are going to start being on your outside more. And it recharges and it makes up for the discomfort.
And I'm going to add to that. I was actually listening to Brene Brown, shocker. Okay. And she was talking about how someone asked her, well, how do you care about racism, sexism, LGBTQ? Like, why aren't you exhausted? And she's like, I care about the uplifting of humans. And I thought that was just so perfect because all these different ideas are just about uplifting others and empowering others. And as a human race, we're all in this together and we all want to be better. And I just thought, what an easy way to think about it. Instead of categorizing everything and I have to do this for this, this for this. It's all encompassing. And that made it easy for me to grasp all these different ideas of how to help. And I'm just constantly just empowering people. Then that's it.
And can I give all of us permission to opt out of arguing with people who are violently entrenched in their opinions?
Yes.
You don't have to. I know we talked about talking with family, but please don't talk to people that don't want to talk to you about it. Save your breath. Don't give them, I think that's the thing is anytime, I know the family members that are going to come into my DMs after I post certain things. And now I just realize, like, we're just not going to talk about this. And it doesn't mean doesn't mean I'm going to stop talking about it, but for cultural change, you have to move where the movement is. You have to lean in to where things are already moving. You have to lean in and engage with someone who's at least a little bit willing to acknowledge that there's a problem. And so if you spend your time spinning your wheels, well, you just get stuck in the mud with them. And paying attention to the people that are at least curious and like, oh, I never thought of it that way. Spending your energy, you get way more bang for your buck, I think, as far as change. That's my own personal belief when it comes to cultural change. Spend your time on the stakeholders. Spend your time on the people who already have at least a little bit of interest in it, because you end up burning 90% of your energy on someone who just wants to fight. My thought does not represent the views of Trusted Health and or necessarily Ashley, just my thought.
Well, I agree with you personally. Also, it does not represent everyone, but I agree. Absolutely. Just a few things. Wanted to know, a few people shared that they love the book Me and White Supremacy. That's on my list next. I'm reading White Fragility right now, so I definitely need to move that way once I'm finished.
Here's the thing with Me and White Supremacy, guys. It's a workbook. Just as that was my thing the first time I went through it, I'll be honest, I 50-50 read it, 50-50 like, oh, okay, I'll do the power in that book is in doing the journaling and really making it like a time of reflection with yourself. So yeah, I just have to get that.
Oh, wow. I'm excited for it though.
Yeah.
There was a question I want to go back and ask. Cassandra asked, what barriers do you anticipate when bringing your voices forward in the healthcare setting, management, leadership?
Dismissal.
Yep.
I think it's just more of the same. Well, this isn't a big issue, or it's the same. And maybe Ashley can say this better than me, but I feel like the same barriers that
so I think what's hard in the medical specifically is we have a huge culture of, well, we've always done it this way. And so it's hard to get people to see that just because it's always been done this way doesn't make it a good way to do it. And how it's the silent white supremacy of just white is the norm. That's something that's just always been done that way. And so it's really hard to break those norms. So that is a huge barrier in itself. And what it's going to take is linking with other people who want change and demand change, and showing that this is we're a force to be reckoned with. And I think that's why I love that nurses in allyship, I don't think there is a stronger group out there than nurses. When we get together, we are, man, we're a wave to deal with. And that's what I think is really exciting. And this next generation of nurses are feeling even more empowered to make changes. So it's finding those people that you can link arms with. And as you climb the ladder in your profession and in your company or hospital, find those people, link up with those people, and make the changes that you want, because you're in that leadership role for a reason, and you can impact a lot of change in that role.
That's a really good question. What else?
I had a thought, something that was shared with me. Is that okay? That's been really
Absolutely.
Sitting with me. Well, first of all, thank you guys so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. And yes, me and white supremacy has been so eye-opening, to be aware of my own biases that I had no idea that I had, to be honest. And it's, anyway, after some of the events, I did a post, and I felt like I needed to go out and do something and march, and a very wonderful friend of mine who is a Black man said, Lynn, he literally used the word, stay in your lane. That is where you're most powerful. And I have a website where I talk about healthcare cost navigation and, the racial disparities in healthcare access. And it just really, it was such, it sticks with me every single day, actually, that sometimes I think I get this instinct, and it's perhaps that savior, what you're talking about, would hinge on that savior idea, or more on the performative aspect of things, but really truly to use your existing strengths and your existing areas where you're respected, and then integrate into that. And when he said that, I haven't stopped thinking about it every single day since. And so I wanted to share that because it really sort of helped me question my actions and the meaning behind it and the impact that I want to have to better optimize it.
Yeah. And then, yeah, and I think part of that is just being authentic in your role. And part of our profession is kind of part of our identity. So that's where we can make the most impact, because we're in line with our profession so much and identify so much. And that's how other people see us too. So if we're making our changes within our own lane, then that's where we're going to make the greatest impact. I think that is a great point of discussion.
Hey, Eddie, I just saw your quote, your question in the chat about increasing trust in the ethnic communities. I think you're right. There's a huge breakdown of trust. A lot of due to that kind of savior complex coming in. I know there's an organization here in my town that just doesn't want, like they've actually said, like, please, I think, what did she say? Please, no colonizers, like you're just gonna make it worse for what we're already trying to do. I think a place to start for people that if you do want to get involved in your community, recognize that there's a lot of trust. And what Ashley had talked about with, you know, just running into a code and assuming you know what needs to be done, I would say show up and just listen and recognize that our impulse, and I'm just speaking mostly for white people, our impulse is going to be to center our voice and to center our ideas, but just listen and watch and take a lot of time to understand if you are wanting to work with a certain community or a certain organization. Take the bulk of your time understanding what they do, how they do it, why they do it, and then let them tell you how they'd like you to help, and just do that. Because they've been doing the work. They don't, oftentimes there's a risk of going in and doing more harm than good. And I don't, that's not something, Eddie, personally, I have a ton of experience with, but outside of just staying in a place of humility and openness and listening. Those are my thoughts. I saw that in the chat and I thought I wanted to highlight that. I thought that was a really good point.
Oh, he also just shared one of the keys to increasing trust is excellent follow-up. That's a great point. It's a very good point.
I think that's huge, and don't disappear. I think that's one of the fears around the movement right now is it escalated excitement so quickly that the fear is that it's gonna just trickle off. And that's a valid fear. That is a completely valid fear. And I think as allies, that's part of our role is don't stop talking about it. And I love being consistent with it and staying in it. And yes, you're going to take your breaks and grace and you need to take a breather, but know in your mind, I am stepping back into it. You're just handing the baton off. That's all we're doing is helping each other hand the baton off. So there is presence always in the movement.
And, you know, something I noticed in myself, there was a protest for healthcare workers in town. And I went, and it was a White Coats for Black Lives. And I got there and I had this like excitement, energy of like, we're here, we're doing it. All right, yay. And the moment I got there, I realized like, what is going on inside of me that I think this is a time to be excited. And just recognizing that my default impulse, the place that I'm coming from, it just like kind of what Ashley said, I think with this work, like read the room and recognize that the place that we're coming from as white allies especially is going to be from a less informed place, and our emotional defaults aren't necessarily going to be on the same page as the people who've been doing the work for a long time and have been in this struggle. And to not, you know, there's just to learn, Cherie said this, learn when to lean in and when to pull back, and learn that dance. As much as we're unlearning and learning things, allyship,
it's a dance.
Service is a dance of how little of me is like just when to lean in, when to pull back, and just be in that consistency. I love that, Eddie, what you just shared. Just follow through, be consistent. We're going to have at the end of this, there's a lot of links to Instagram accounts. Many of them may be people you already follow. If you are looking to diversify your Instagram feed, you will notice the algorithm changes, your advertisements, it'll change a lot of things. As you're doing that, can I just encourage everyone, be a silent witness on those pages and those spaces. If it's a time for discussion, obviously, but be there to learn, be there to listen, be there to just be quiet. A big uptick of accounts got flagged and reported simply because people coming in didn't understand the culture and the climate of the space that they were in. and they just came in with their own preconceived notions of whiteness, and did a lot of harm. And that kind of happens again and again and again. So just be aware of that tendency in all of us. So, yeah, but there's gonna be a lot of resources, because we love resources, right? We're nurses, we like resources. Give us the articles. So we have given you the articles. We've given you books for kids, books for grownups. But at the end of the day, it's you know where you want to start. You know where you want to start. You know, there's something that's calling you right now, of a specific area or a specific aspect of this, and that's your business. That's not ours. That's not ours to tell you, oh, you're doing it wrong. That's your business. So
we have a question. Have any of you had the experience of a patient tell you that they don't want you to take care of them because you don't look like them? I personally have never had that experience as a white female.
no, but it wouldn't bother me.
I have not either. We've had the experience of male nurses getting asked to not take care. But personally, I would respect that decision. Part of healthcare change is empowering patients' voices, and that's a very valid request. And until we can build trust more as healthcare personnel, those requests are fair.
Well, and I just say, when those things come up and those moments happen, just notice how quick are we to be curious about why, and how quick are we to assume we know why.
Mm-hmm.
Just
stay curious.
Kirsten just shared something I want to call out. The interesting thing that with that request is a lack of diversity in healthcare workers. And, you know, this is something that we've been a point of conversation with Trusted a lot this week. We shared a blog piece written by Ashley Sales. She's a nurse practitioner, and she's Black, and she shared an experience about usually being the only Black nurse on a unit. And it was really eye-opening, and the amount of response we got from it was of nurses being able to relate to having that experience was actually pretty heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why there's organizations like CCBNA that is working so hard to diversify healthcare, and that's one of the important roles that we have in the community, and we have to do better. And just like the quote of Maya Angelou, if you know better, you do better. And so now we know, and now we must make changes and do better as a healthcare system.
And there's also, in whatever city you're in, there are likely nursing chapters for every, you know, I know at least here in Sacramento, we have a Hispanic nurses chapter. We have, you know, Capital City Black Nurses Association. Just a Google search, and you know, these are chapters and places that we can financially support as well. You know, in the work that's already being done. Yeah, so true, so true.
Should we move into resources, or are there more questions?
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Da-da-da-da. Yeah, yes, Kayleen, yes.
Yes, Kayleen.
Yes. 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 Because what happens, right? Like, you know, how many of us who are white, like, when have you been the only white person in the room, and how did you feel?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, who are you more vulnerable with than with your leadership? Yeah, she's lack of diversity in nursing leadership. Ooh, yes. We are made. Yeah, yes. Okay. So this is, again, we'll just a quick, some books, pick what you want. There's so many more than just this, but these are some of the ones that both Ashley and I separately or together have gotten a lot out of. Oh, yeah.
I was just going to say, I love the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. That's like,
I think someone mentioned that in the chat.
Amazing book. And then I am currently reading the new Jim Crow, and my mind is just like blown every page I turn. So just want to
and then books for kids. One of the things we talked about, these beliefs are formed early, and bringing these conversations up early is just so powerful. Some podcasts. You guys.
I'm a podcast person. Nicole is not.
I am a huge podcast person, but yeah,
these are a few that I just love, and there's a ton more out there. Also, this is not a.
And again, these are just some Instagram accounts. This list was actually 4 times this size, but I brought it down to just the essentials for right now, just in the spirit of not doing too much. And then this, for those of you that if you have your phone and you have a QR reader, this is a 21-day habit building challenge on unlearning prejudice, unlearning bias.
What's great about this one is there's 3 different things available. One is if you're new to allyship. The second one is if you've been an ally for a long time. And the third one is self-care, which I was like, yes. So all 3 of those are available on there, and it's fantastic.
And then this was great. This was just made in June by a couple of friends in the beginning of the protests. And this should be called Anti-Racism for People with OCD. It's got little minute blocks of educational, so like an article, a chapter from a book, links or everything on it, and then actions that can be taken where you can just set, like, I have 5 minutes a day for this. I have 10 minutes a day. And it's a really, really powerful document, really brilliantly done by these 2 young women. God bless technology. Our references, this list is not exhaustive. Again, this will be available for others, for people to have. And then an article, if there's any article you read on here, may I put a plug in for number 5, cultural humility versus cultural competence. This article, this understanding and approach of how to look at the difference between the 2 has unmade everything I thought I knew about being a caregiver. It's a powerful read. Oh, that was it. We made it to the end.
We have a couple things before you guys go. Liz North wanted to ask, are you guys going to be able to do this talk again? This is so great. I have a lot of nurse friends who couldn't attend today. I didn't know, Ashley and Nicole, if you had anything coming up.
Liz and I work together, so we can set something up.
Yep. Okay. And Liz, this will also be recorded, so we can share it on YouTube and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then did you ladies have a poll that you wanted to do?
Oh my gosh, we never did the poll in the beginning. We just got so excited.
Okay.
Oh my God. I mean, sure. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, this was because you guys were doing the post survey. Yes, please. Thank you. Please take our poll so we can have some post data. I mean,
please be honest. We love this feedback, obviously.
And yes, this is helpful. And again, we recognize this really is from such a, we already said it. We're good.
As you can tell, me and Nicole are very imperfect, so they're great to be teaching.
It isn't.
I think you guys are wonderful.
Anonymous.
Yeah, it is anonymous.
Yeah, it's still coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And while the poll is completing, I know we went a touch over, but the topic is so important, and I'm very, very grateful to both Ashley and Nicole for putting this together and sharing it. If y'all haven't figured out, the CCBNA is just a wonderful organization, and I'm just so proud that we've had this partnership with them, even though it's been very new, but we're very grateful for it. And if you haven't yet donated to the CCBNA, this is the probably 5th time you're gonna hear it. Please do that. It's been in all the emails, on our landing page. They are an organization that will be doing wonderful things with your money. So go ahead and give some to them.
Follow the National Black Nurses Association on Instagram for events. They put out the most amazing events.
And look for your local chapters. I know we had people all across the US today. So look for your local chapters and just see how you can serve and yeah, be a part of it.
Yeah. I'm going to share the poll. Here you go.
Oh yeah, that was supposed to be at the very beginning.
This one is after the fact. So this one is after listening.
Oh, perfect. Maybe we'll do our pre one after the fact.
Yeah, we just did the new one. So it looks like there's a lot of folks who are very inclined to make some changes. And again, we're just very, very grateful for all of you for attending today. Is there anything else, Nicole and Ashley, you want to share?
No,
I'm just grateful to be here. So thank you so much for everyone who attended and for you guys for facilitating this.
Yeah, huge honor. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you all for joining and being open. We would love to see you at more events, and I'll talk to these lovely ladies after the fact to see if we can do more, because we would love it. So have a great evening. We appreciate you, and stay safe. Bye, y'all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.